It's time now for our recurring feature we call Inside and Out. It's our monthly look at global health issues that affect you both inside and out. Now today we want to explore the mental health consequences of traumatic illness and more specifically the most recent Ebola outbreak. More than 11,000 people died when Ebola swept through Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia over a 2-year period beginning in December 2013. Now, while the physical symptoms may have faded, the psychological impact is still being felt. Mental health symptoms are usually harder to diagnose and treat than those that are visible in plain sight. Now, the WHO projects that 163,000 Liberians are at risk of severe mental illness. Whether they experience the infection firsthand or witness loved ones dying, those invisible scars still exist. Some 17,000 people were infected and lived to tell about it. Among them is Gerald, a 32-year-old man from Liberia. This is his story, as told to CCTV's Katerina Vitozzi.
Life before 2014, I was an employee of JFK, the National Referral Hospital, and I have my family, I have my fiancé, my children. We were all living together, living a normal life. We started hearing about this virus in 2014, and we heard of this virus in Guinea, and later we heard of Sierra Leone.
Was at that time?
The first time I started feeling this was when I went to one of the commercial banks and I started feeling kind of pain in my hand. But then after 2 days, the first day, the second day I started feeling cold, and then I took the brochure that they gave us to read on Ebola and started going through, and I started taking into consideration those symptoms, and it came after one after another, and then I said, this should be a kind of serious thing. My friend came in and said, this thing we need to go to the hospital. But when I went to the center, the unfortunate part, there was no bed. Fortunately for me and unfortunately for another patient, already expired, and then while they were taking her, and then the hygienic came and said, Dad, we can rush that guy because that guy is almost like dying. While they were facing the bed, I dropped on my hand, and my hand, I could not lift on my hand again. And there was a guy lying on his bed, and he woke up, started walking around, he was looking at me. He said, well, Dad, I'm well. I can offer this guy my bed, so the guy can go on my bed, and then I can calm down. And then I said, oh, for you? He said, yes. So Dad said, okay, then we can do that. Spray the bed. When I went on the bed, within less than 30 minutes, that guy was gone. And I saw them wrapping him. But I could not talk, and I lied down and said, wow, this is the end of life. And the joyous day ever in my life was the day I was pronounced negative and above to leave the ETU. When I left the ETU, the first mental issue I started to experience was flashback. Yeah, thinking about my life in the ETU, it was always, I always had that flashback all of the time. I didn't get any help from the Ministry of Health. Nothing. Never a day I got help from the ministry. So what I did was to defeat my situation, I erased that from my mind, that I am a normal person and I have to get back on my feet, and I don't need to wait for people to come to my house all of the time and say, you need to get this, you need to get this. Some of my friends, when we used to go to the ministry, have meeting. When I meet them, I take their numbers, call them at night, talk to them, pray along with them. Sometimes some of them will tell me, oh, I'm faced with this problem and I need this intervention, and I will kill myself because people are stigmatizing me and say, where do you live? Say, I live this place, I will go there. My thinking is, Gerald, one way or the other, have some level of contact. He can talk to other people. He can go to Facebook, he can go to LinkedIn and get friends. But what happened to those children who have survived? Can they go there? What happened to those orphans in the rural area? Can they talk to people? Can they see people? Can they have the same level of thinking I have, who will sponsor those children?
That was Gerald recounting some of his experiences after surviving Ebola. Medical experts share his concerns about the children who've been affected either directly or indirectly by the Ebola virus. The government estimates that 8,000 children here in Liberia lost either one or both parents to the disease. I've been speaking to Sheldon Yett, who's the head of UNICEF here in Liberia. I began by asking him how great the need was for social and mental health care provision for these children and their families.
The need for psychosocial support for all the children affected by this disease remains massive. The cameras have gone home, the journalists have left, the dead bodies are off the street, but the needs are there. After children have seen these Ebola warriors parachuting into their towns, after they've lost loved ones, parents, friends, that's something that stays with you. It's not something that goes away overnight. It certainly requires support of trained professionals and people who can make sure that they've been able to reintegrate themselves well into their communities and to make sure that they're adjusting well to the new Liberia.
I'm sure that you've gone out, visited children in communities. How is this sort of trauma manifesting itself? What are perhaps some of the stories you've heard from the children and their families?
Well, kids sometimes take two reactions. Some kids just deny anything happened at all and retreat into their shells. Other children I've spoken to like to talk about what happened and like to relive the memories of their friends, their relatives, sometimes their parents who have died, and like to tell us in lots of detail of who they were, how loving and caring their mothers were, and you know that sticks with you. It's one thing to go to a health center and see that their needs of lack of drugs or that mothers aren't there when they should be there. It's something to hear from a child what's happened, from a child who lost her mother to a disease and saw her mother being carried away with guys dressed in white whose faces she couldn't even see. It sticks with you.
There's a great need. How much funding is required to properly address those needs?
The funding required for these children and for others affected by this disease is relatively modest. Everyone likes to talk about the need for infrastructure, the need for investments in energy, investments in roads, investments in manufacturing, and yes, that's important. But it's also important to invest in social services, to ensure there's a cadre, a workforce of trained professionals who can work in communities to meet the needs of children and others affected by Ebola and all the other diseases and stresses that affect the majority of the population of this country.
Is it more difficult perhaps sometimes to galvanize funding for social service and psychosocial support services? I mean, sometimes it seems that people are happier funding a hospital rather than perhaps providing funding for a team of 10 properly trained counsellors.
You know, in this world, people want credit for what they're doing. People want to be able to see their plaque on the wall. That's easy with a hospital. It's easy with a public health institute. It's much harder with an individual, with a trained workforce. So, indeed, it has been difficult to get donor interest in investing in social services, but it's absolutely crucial if this country is going to develop.
And what is the current level of sort of social welfare support in Liberia?
Well, with the support of UNICEF, this government has been able to increase the number of social workers by a factor of 10. But that sounds more impressive than the numbers actually are. It's from 12 to 120. That's just a drop in the ocean of the actual need. We need to keep these people in the field, on the ground, and on the payroll. That's absolutely crucial. There isn't funding now to do this for the indefinite future. We need to make sure that funding is established and on the books.
What is the risk to not only children's health and that, you know, and the wider sort of community that they're in, but also to sort of development as a whole for a country if mental health and post-traumatic issues aren't dealt with?
I think we risk having a bit of a Potemkin village. We risk having great infrastructure, investments in energy and other things which are so crucial to the development of a country, without investing in the people, without investing in mental health and social services. We won't be able to have the human capital, the fully developed human capital this country so urgently needs. Development is more than just the facts and figures and the knowledge people have. It's also the resilience, the ability to adapt to stresses, to adapt to new events that happen. And you need that. You need the people on the ground who can support these individuals.
And obviously I know UNICEF doesn't work unilaterally. You work very closely with local government and local ministries. You mentioned earlier that sometimes people like to see a plaque on the wall. They like to see a concrete place. You say that I've done this. Has it been a challenge to encourage, you know, your government partners to set aside part of their budget for these sorts of services?
Absolutely, it has been a challenge to encourage people to do so. People understand the need. Everybody wants to invest in this, but money is scarce. And we're also in a political environment. People like to see the immediate fruits of their investments. Investing in social services sometimes doesn't bear immediate gains, but it's absolutely crucial.